and welcome to Professor Pincushion. I'm Tova, and in today's tutorial, I'm going to be talking about how to sew on feathers. Feathers are a delicate and unique embellishment. I'll be going over how to sew on individual feathers and also how to sew on feather trim. Ready for your projects to take flight? Let's go ahead and get started. The thing about working with feathers is you want to treat them very delicately because once they break, they're not coming back. So you don't want to bend them, and you also have to think about how you're going to care for the garment. You can't just sew a bunch of feathers on a garment and then throw it in with your regular wash. You may have to have it dry clean only, or sew your feathers in such a way that you can remove them later if you need to wash your garment. So you just want to keep that in mind before you go through the trouble. Let's go over how we sew on individual feathers. So we're going to pretend like my sample fabric here is my garment, and I want to just sew on this one feather in this spot. So I'm basically going to hold it gently in the spot where I want it to. Again, being careful not to press down too hard or give too much pressure because I don't want to break the shaft of the feather right here. So I'm going to start, and I'm using a contrasting thread just so it's a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to come up on one side of the feather, and you want to actually be right next to it like that. So you can see I'm starting down here, and then I'm just going to go on the other side of the shaft of the feather. So you're just basically doing a little whip stitch, and I pull slowly because I want to make sure I'm not grabbing too many of these little feather strands in there with me. And then I'm just going to repeat that process a couple more times. So it's just a very small stitch. Obviously, if you use a matching thread, it's going to look a lot better. And I don't just want it attached to this one spot because it may still be able to slide out. So I'm going to add some extra security by adding the stitch in a few more places. All right, so I did about 3 times. Now I'm going to come up, I would say about a 1/2 inch from this stitch. So I went up, and I'm still bringing my needle right against the feather shaft right there. And now I'm going to do about 3 stitches on this side. And it will pull apart the feather a little bit. So after I finish doing my stitches, I can just kind of gently push this back into place so it won't be as obvious, and if you use a matching thread it's going to be even less obvious. So I would do a few stitches here, and then I could come up and I can do a couple more stitches. So I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. Here's my feather stitched into place, and if I was just to give this a little tug, it's not going to really go anywhere. You don't want to pull on it too hard, but it should be pretty secure. So you want to do at least 3 or 4 of these type of stitches to hold it, and then if you want to continue, you can always add another feather and just repeat the process. If you're not looking to sew on individual feathers, but instead you want a strand of feathers like a trim, you can purchase already made trim like this one, and it can come in 1 ply, which means it's just a single layer of feathers, or 2 ply, which means it's a double layer of feathers, depending on how thick you want your feather layer to be. You can also make your own feather trim like this one, which I'll show you how to do next. First, you're going to cut strips of tissue paper, and my tissue paper is about 1.5 inches in width, but it could be between 1.5 to 2 inches. It really doesn't matter. We're just using it as a foundation. You're going to start laying your feathers how you want them. So I'm mostly focusing on the bottom part of the tissue. It doesn't matter how far the shaft of the feather extends into the paper. I just want to make sure that I start getting some of the feathery part down here at the bottom, and it's sort of lining up at the bottom of the feathers here. So first thing, I'm just going to lay out all my feathers so they look how I want them to look in my trim. Once you have all your feathers laid out, go ahead and grab some clear tape, and you're just going to tape down the top portion here just to hold your feathers into place on the paper. You may need to have a friend help you with this part. Next, I'm going to take my tissue paper with feathers on it to my sewing machine and just sew a straight stitch right along the bottom of my tissue paper. I would say I'm about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch away from that bottom edge. I would use an old needle for this, and you can see I'm using a walking foot, but I don't really think it's necessary. I would just go pretty slow and take your time. And you're gonna do this regular straight stitch twice. So I do this one, and then I'm gonna do one right over it. Next, I'm gonna use my paper scissors, and I'm gonna cut most of this tissue paper off. So I'm gonna cut right above my stitching line. I'm not going right next to it, but just a little bit away from it. And if you need to cut through the feather part, go ahead and do that. We're gonna trim all that part off. Take your strip of your tissue paper with your feathers on them, and you're gonna place them in your decorative ribbon or bias tape if you choose. My ribbon is about 1 inch in width, but you can do it a little bit bigger, like an inch and a half. And you can see I'm placing it at the bottom part of my ribbon, and then I could take this top ribbon and I can fold it in half. And that way it's going to be enclosed on both sides. Then you're going to pin it best you can, and we'll take it to our sewing machine to stitch it into place. I'm just going to do a regular straight stitch at the bottom of my ribbon to hold the two sides of the ribbon together, and don't forget to back stitch. So now my ribbon is stitched on. You can see my green thread there. So my feathers are not going to come off, and it's much more manageable to handle your feathers like this if you want to treat them like a trim, where you're going to put them on the hemline or you're going to layer them. Let's say that I just want the feathers to be along the hemline. Here's one way that I like to do it. So we're going to pretend this is the bottom of my skirt, and I want the feathers to go along the hemline, so this is the hemline of the skirt. I have it right side facing up. I'm going to grab my feather trim here, and I'm going to place it along the edge. This is the folded side right here. The folded side of my ribbon is actually going to extend past the bottom of my hem here. I would say about 1/8 of an inch. So if you need to trim your hem, you can go ahead and do that. So you can see my black, you can't see my green, and if I was to lift this up, you're going to see a little bit of the black extending past that. Now you want the right side of your feather, so whatever side looks best, that should be the side that goes right side to the fabric. You're going to pin this into place, and then we're going to do a stitch right along the bottom again. So right where I have my green stitch previously, I'm just going to stitch right on top of that. So I'm just going over my previous stitch line, which is the green line. Don't forget to back stitch, and then I'll show you what to do next for the hem. Then I'm going to take my skirt and I'm going to flip it so I'm looking at the wrong side of the fabric. But I'm going to pull out my feathers, and you're going to take this and you're going to fold it. I'll show right here since it's a little bit easier to see. And you'll just see just a little bit of green. We don't want the edge of my ribbon to be completely on the folded edge because we don't want to accidentally see this. We just want to see a little bit of our main fabric, and then I'm going to pin it into place, and then we're going to stitch along the top part of the ribbon for this part. So this will not only look nice on the inside, but also it helps cover up the raw edge of the fabric. So it's just another way to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this into place and then stitch it. My straight stitch is going right along the top of that ribbon. Now if you don't want to have this be a machine stitch, you can always stitch this on by hand if you want something a little bit more subtle for your hemline, doing something like a hand blind stitch. Once you finish, the right side of your garment's hemline should look something like this. If you want to do something like layering your feather trim, it's similar to doing the same thing with fringe. So this is the right side of my skirt. It's already hemmed up. I'm going to do marks where I want my first row of feathers to be. So they're about 2.5 inch mark. It really depends on how long your feathers are. Mine are pretty long, and I want to make sure they're going to extend a little bit past my hemline here. So that's why I did 2.5 inches, but it really depends on how long your feathers are. So I'm going to mark them with my little purple fabric marker lines, and then I'm just going to line up the top of the ribbon with that mark, and I'm going to pin it into place. And then just like we did before, you're going to stitch at the top of the ribbon into place. Once my first row is stitched in, I can go ahead and continue the process. So now I'm going to measure up about 2 inches. I like to give a little bit of a space. That way, even though it ends up being less full if you stack them on top of each other, but you won't be using as much of this trim. So you can let it spread out a little bit more. So I go up 2 inches, I make a mark, and now I'm just going to repeat the process. And you would just keep doing this until you have the number of layers that you wish to have. So then I would pin this and go ahead and sew at the top of it. And you can see it blends in pretty well with my feather layer underneath. Now, if you make something with feathers, please share a picture with us. New tutorials are released weekly, so please subscribe to be notified of the next release. Make sure to check out our other videos and visit ProfessorPincushion.com to view our complete library with well over 200 sewing video tutorials, including our exclusive premium content. Our premium membership is only $5 a month for unlimited access and only available at ProfessorPincushion.com. Also, don't forget to download our mobile app for videos on the go. Thanks for watching.